Hello everyone. Welcome to another Alcometer webinar. Today's session will be on surface profile and the differences between surface profile and surface roughness. I'll share my presentation with you. As always, if you have any questions, please type them in the text box and either Steve or Chris, who are working behind the scenes, can answer any queries that you have. So without further ado, I'll share my screen and go through the presentation. Hello, hope you can all see my screen okay. The title of today's seminar is Do You Know Your Profile? Well, firstly, the profile is measuring actually the surface preparation that we do on the substrate. And blasting the substrate with either grit or shot from an abrasive blast machine, and the measurement of the surface following the blasting is actually the first stage of the coating process. We need to ensure that we have the correct profile of the surface to make sure that the paint has a key to bind onto to give it the correct adhesion parameters that has to go through in situ where it will be operating. So if we have a too low a profile, then the paint has insufficient surface to bind to and will result on poor adhesion to the substrate. So in the lifetime of the coatings, it may peel off during that and give an access for corrosion to the pipeline, which would mean replacement, which would need a lot more work. However, if we have too much profile, then the surface will have too many peaks, too deeper valleys, and this would need extra paint to cover those higher peaks, which means that you will be using extra paint there, which is extra cost to the job, which wouldn't have been costed into it. And also, it may lead to insufficient coverage of the substrate, which means that some of the peaks that will be showing through the coating will lead to rust spots and again a weakness in the coatings and eventually a weakness in the substrate, the pipework or the tank or the marine surface of a vessel. So how do we measure the surface that we've just prepared ready for coating? Well, these can be looked at in three ways. We can measure the profile, we can measure the roughness, and we can visually assess the appearance of the coat, whether that be from a tactile point of view or from just a visual, your eyes looking at the surface. Each one is different, so I'll just go through the basic fundamentals of why they differ today and during the seminar. So, profile and roughness. Profile is not the same as roughness, which I think most of us know, and vice versa. The roughness is not the same as profile. The profile is really the average of the heights and the valleys in a small area. So we're not actually measuring the amount of peaks and valleys. We're just measuring the height from the top of the peak to the valley. and giving the average there. Whereas roughness measures the peaks and the valleys, but also measures across a certain distance that will give you the amount or the frequency of the peaks and valleys. Basically, the higher the number of valleys and peaks across a certain area, the rougher the surface. So if we look at diagrams A and B on the screen, both have the same profile, but A is rougher than B because there are more peaks and valleys across a certain area. So we have to be careful when we're specifying profile and roughness. If we just look at roughness in a bit detail, basically that's how the roughness gauge works. We have the MAR gauge there that is roughness, and on the tip of it there in the bottom left hand corner you can actually see a stylus, which those of us, including myself, are old enough to remember the old record players with the needle that went onto the record to produce the music. That works in a very similar way. The red triangles represent the stylus, and that will move across the screen in the direction of the dotted red arrow across the top. But as you move across that arrow, then the needle will follow the profile of the surface, which will measure the valley depth and the peak height, and also the distance. Now, using some very complicated formulae, these will work out, the gauge will work out the RZ, RA, RY values, which will specify the roughness. One downside of this instrument, it is very sensitive. So it is very difficult actually to get a good reading in the field, because of all the activities that are going on around a substrate, whether it be on a vessel, whereas in one certain area the vessel is being blasted, and another certain area it's being coated, and in the middle is an inspector trying to do a measurement on roughness. Now, the vibrations caused by blasting and coating will affect this gauge because it is very sensitive to movement, and the needle will jump off the surface, which will give a false reading. So if we move on now to profile, most surface profile is measured according to ASTM D4471, which actually specifies 3 different methods: the surface comparator, the dial depth gauge, and Test-X or profile tape. Now, no method is right, no method is wrong. It will depend upon the job specification, and that will outline the method to use, and that will also outline the actual profile that's required for the paint. Now, if we look at method A firstly, method A is the surface comparator. There are 2 types of surface comparator, one for when the surface has been blasted by grit, and one where it's been blasted by shot. These will actually create 2 types of surface, or 2 variants of surface. The grit will be a more angular surface, where the shot will create a more rounded surface with rounded peaks and rounded valleys. This is a very subjective test. It's very much down to the opinion of the inspector. It could be that one inspector gives a different opinion than another. If we look how the comparator works, we have four areas on the comparator, which you can see on the right hand side of the screen. They have four different levels of coarseness or profile of a surface. Now the inspector will look at the surface visually and compare the surface to one of those areas to see which it is similar to or different from, and then they will judge the surface on their opinion to where it falls within roughness or profile to the four areas of comparator. So there are four areas there. However, this gives 5 different readings. So the top left-hand corner of the comparator is the finest area. So if your blasted surface is finer than the finest, then that would be graded finer than fine. If on inspection it seems to be between the finest and the medium, which is the top right-hand corner, then it would be classed as fine. And then again, the medium moving on to the coarse, then it will be classed as medium. And then using the same way between those, you have the coarse, and then you have the coarser than coarse. So 5 different readings. It doesn't actually give a value to these, it is an opinion. And each inspector's opinion can differ. What are the advantage of this? Well, it's a very low cost test. It's quick to use. It's very portable. It doesn't offer any ongoing costs. And it gives the variety between the grit and the shot. So a little bit of flexibility there. But at the end of the day, it can be described as not an exact science. So moving on to something that can give an actual value to the surface. Method B is the depth gauge or the Alcometer 224. Firstly, quite simple to use. It's quick, it's durable, and again, there's very little ongoing tests. Firstly, easy to zero, just zero on a glass slide. The slide has to be glass. It's the only one with a truly zero profile, as the glass was once liquid, and that gives a very, very flat surface. It can calibrate it against the glass slide as well, using one of the shims that come with the gauge, and it's very easy to check that everything's okay visually using the visual inspection of the needle at the end of the gauge. So, like I say, very, very easy to use. Comes in the basic and top that gives the ability to download results to the Alcomaster. So it's easy report generation. You don't have to move vast areas of the surface. The testing, to build up a test result, it's better to take 10 readings to build up the average of the profile. There's no need to move across a large area, because you can take all the readings in one place. You may think that is landing on the same place, but it's impossible really to get the needle to land exactly in the same valley or exactly on the same peak or exactly halfway up in between, because of the profile is so fine that there's such a number of peaks and troughs that you cannot get it to land in the same place. So this is just an outline how this works. As you can see, there's a needle at the bottom of the probe. Like I say, it may appear that it is on the same place, but however, that needle has gone into a different valley, it's onto a different peak, giving you 10 different readings that will build up an average. Very quick to use, get 10 readings in 30 seconds, no problem at all, because you don't have to move. Complete, the gauge will act as quickly as the inspector can inspect the surface. If we move on to method C, the replica tape or Testex tape, as we use it, it's been used a long time. It's very good reputation in the marketplace. It tends to be specified in a lot of jobs. However, it is quite slow to use. It has got high cost per test. The calibration of the snap gauge is the only thing that you can calibrate. You can't actually calibrate the test piece. And you again, using the gauge, you can calibrate that using shims. However, one downside of this is a typical blast profile or profile of the substrate for coating falls within a certain range. That range being 38 to 64 microns. Now that has basically Testex specify that if your profile falls into that range, then you should be doing two tests, one using the coarse paper test strip and one using the extra coarse. I don't know many testers or inspectors that would actually do two tests, but that is the true test method, which is time consuming, it's expensive, but however, this does give you a permanent physical reference that you can keep to in your record book as well. So how do these three test methods differ? Well, if we compare all three, the surface comparator is a subjective view. It gives no numerical value to record. It's a matter of the inspector writing that down in his record book. However, it is durable and it is cheap and it's very portable. The 224, this will give an average of the profile. Again, it's cheap, it's portable, and it's very, very easy to use. The Testex tape will give the value of the highest peak to the lowest value. To the lowest valley. Again, that will give. We have to be careful here that when using a 224, it does give a different reading to the Testex tape. Now, unfortunately, there's no conversion factor that can go from one to the other or back again. It does give different results, and we have to record which method we use to ensure that the records are kept correctly. Just moving on, again, we've mentioned the cost of ownership. This graph shows the break-even point of a 224 and the Test-X tapes. Obviously, the cost of the 224 is a lot higher than the first for the equipment, hence the higher commencing point of the red line. The Test-X tape has low initial purchase price. However, the Test-X tape does require higher consumable costs as you're doing tests, and also much more time consuming. So there is a break-even point of just under 800 tests for the 224, and every test after that will give you economic advantage and time advantage, whereas the inspector can, instead of doing Test-X tapes, can measure quickly using a 224 and then move on to the next job. So just in summary, surface comparator is the cheapest. It's probably the most robust method of testing. However, it is subjective test. It's the inspector's opinion, and one inspector could have different views than another. The 224 offers fast, accurate test results with electronic data storage, and it actually gives you a value of the surface, which can be compared to future blasting areas or the surface further down the job. The Test-X tape gives a permanent record, a physical record. However, the repeated testing of the same piece of Test-X will actually destroy some of the peak heights. So the results will tend to be a little bit lower every time you retest the Test-X tape. The Test-X tape is time consuming compared to the 224, especially where you need 2 tests per profile, and the ongoing purchase cost of the Test-X is a lot higher than the 224, and payback is 800 tests. So the purchasing department who don't want to spend the money and want to show initial low costs when purchasing equipment, basically the argument is in a year's time or less than a year's time, the 224 will actually be cheaper. Like I said previously, the job specification will determine which test method to use, and we need to record which test method we use because it will give different results. So that's basically the presentation, quick presentation on profile today. Thank you for your listening. Thank you for your time.